I am a general practitioner of medicine, and over the course of 30 years I have witnessed a wide variety of ailments, wider, indeed, than you may think or even imagine. For example, a man came in to see me the other day requesting a tickle-ectomy. His highly agitated condition suggested considerable anxiety and suffering. I have seen these symptoms before, though rarely to this degree. He wanted me, begged me, pleaded to remove one of his highly sensitive regions of touch, the exact location of which must remain confidential due to the doctor-patient relationship. When I suggested that the operation might be premature and possibly unnecessary, he insisted that I at least consider a tickle bypass. I countered with an offer to prescribe a mild sedative, one that would numb the area, followed by several sessions of behavior modification therapy. He said he would prefer a second opinion and left, only to return 2 days later, willing to accept any treatment at all. Actually, this man was fortunate. His problem was localized. I gave him a patch and sent him on his way. Some people are plagued with highly specific tickle zones, while others are just generally ticklish all over. Surgical intervention is obviously not indicated for such patients. More severe cases may call for electrotickle shock or the use of tickle suppressants. In the extreme case, for which further treatment would be useless, the recommendation is that patients seek the assistance of the FBI's Tickle Relocation Program. The theory there is that separating the tickler from the ticklee will result in a stable condition. The actual result is usually less promising. While the ticklee does find immediate relief, symptoms of anxiety continue and may actually increase, even in the absence of an actual tickle. And the tickler frequently finds a fresh victim. Typically, those who feel compelled to tickle were once victims themselves, and they now unconsciously perpetuate the cycle. An entirely different pathology is presented by those who tickle themselves. Though rare, the problem of self-amuse is growing, particularly among urban populations, and especially among young females. Robbins, 1974, was the last person to study this isolated phenomenon, but her results were inconclusive due to the fact that she contracted the very problem she was examining and was forced to suspend her research. Science, though appearing to be strictly clinical, does have its dangers. Fools rush in, etc. The etiology of tickling is not well understood, despite thousands of years of study by numerous civilizations, both developed and primitive. Our conception of this activity comes from 5 primary sources: the Bible, biochemistry, folklore, psychology, and philosophy. The creation of Eve from Adam's rib has long been the source of many rib ticklers. Modern feminists find themselves rubbed the wrong way by this and consider the story to be either mythic or absurd. The Greeks believed that tickling was a sign from the gods. Ticklor, twin brother of Horror, was a hermaphroditic sprite who enjoyed sneaking up on the other gods and surprising them with sudden, unexpected touches. Zeus tried to catch this rascal, but could not. Enraged, Zeus threw one of his father of the gods tantrums and turned the prankster into a feather. Tickling for Plato, who learned from Socrates, who wound up drinking hemlock in part because he was an inveterate tickler, hence a problem for the Athenian society, especially the Stoics. Tickling for Plato was in the mind, the idea of tickling. He claimed that if a man could banish the idea from his mind, he would never be ticklish, but he was unable to prove this, and it remained another of his great ideas. Aristotle believed tickling was part of the relationship between men, and not one he particularly favored. A solid punch to the upper arm is preferred over the tickle, he wrote. The Romans, generally influenced by Aristotle, felt that tickling was unmanly, and ticklers, along with poets and weavers, were often ostracized from towns and villages, left to wander the countryside and eventually fall prey to robber gangs. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The man who tickles is lost." None of the Caesars tickled in public, though it was rumored that Augustus Caesar enjoyed raucous tickling sessions with his private counselors. Claudius and Nero also reputedly to be overly fond of tickling, so much so that the practice became degenerate and led to the fall of the great empire, as reported by Gibbon. Early Americans believed that tickling was the devil's work, and possibly a manifestation of witchcraft. There are stories, but no verifiable cases, of unrepentant ticklers being burned at the stake. Romantic poets in England professed that tickling liberated the soul. Dante Gabriel Rossetti and the Pre-Raphaelites carried this activity to an extreme. Subsequently, the Victorians decided the soul was better off unliberated, and they frowned on the practice. De Sade's experiments were considered unscientific, not to mention debased and appalling. Descartes is well known for his "I think, therefore I am," but the conclusion of that statement, "and I like to tickle," is generally omitted. Freud believed that tickling existed in a shadow world between pleasure and pain, and was evidence of the primal urges of the subconscious mind. Jung, Adler, and Horney, while praising the master for his systematic study of the phenomenon, all thought he was much too serious on the subject. A regular grump, Jung said. Seeking to, as they put it, enlighten him, the three snuck up on Freud and tickled him repeatedly, which resulted in their well-known irreparable schism. German philosophers of the 19th century debated such concepts as the categorical tickle and tickle monads, while the 20th century sages, especially in France, discussed a phenomenon they called existentialism. As far as we know, tickling was unknown to the Eskimo and the Aborigine, but was widespread among American Indians, particularly on the plains. The French tickler and the Central Park tickler are peripheral instances of the phenomenon. In 1958, Howard Elkins published the results of his study of the boy raised by wolves, which indicated, or seemed to indicate, that tickling is innate, not learned. This shocked the world and proved very difficult to either substantiate or refute. Finally, Riker, 1966-1967, called those results into question by asking what serious efforts had been made to teach either tickling or responding to tickles in a formal, quantifiable way. He also pointed out that not enough was known about tickling among wolves. Unfortunately, as is so often the case in this field, Riker was unable to secure funds to study his own questions, and the debate continues. Recent investigation has tended to center on the physiology of tickling. Cranmer, 1984, attempted to isolate what he called the pervaroelastic nerve, a sensory conduit that runs from head to toe and throughout the limbs and is, according to him, responsible for the sudden and often spastic tickle reaction. Galbraith, 1985, a disciple of Cranmer, conducted extensive studies in search of an endomorphin, tingling A, which he believed is released on sight at the moment of the tickle and causes a convulsive response. Wilkins, 1988, however, developed the Neoplatonic theory that the tickle is all in the mind, and devoted considerable research to locating a tickle center in the brain. His work, inconclusive to date, has focused on the medulla oblongata. A great deal of psychological research has gone into what exactly motivates the tickler, as well as an attempt to define, if possible, a characteristic portrait of the typical ticklee. In addition, social work has advanced, without the help of federal dollars, it might be noted, the case for an enlightened view of tickling, where those who might wish to be touched and those who feel compelled to do so are brought together in a forum which can provide mutual satisfaction. Surrogate ticklers and volunteer ticklees are being trained, but their numbers are too few at present to have any appreciable effect on the entire population. Opponents of tickling, such as Mothers Against Tickling and the Children of Chronic Ticklers, regard the act as an unwanted invasion of privacy. They are working hard to pass legislation against public occurrences, and a few extremists are trying to get tickling classified as a communicable disease. The anti-tickle activists are determined and well organized, and have already staged demonstrations in several cities. One march in Louisville on September 6, 1990, was disrupted by a pro-tickle faction, and the resulting uproar prompted the intercession of police with dogs and water cannon. In conclusion, I believe it is safe to say that as long as people touch and feel, there will be tickling. Whether it is good or evil, and whether or not such determination can or should be made as a general proposition, and if so, who should make it, will continue to be the subject of debate. We may hope that investigation, both scientific and moral, will proceed, and will lead to a better understanding of this ancient, yet baffling, practice.